The perspectives shared by the participants in this podcast are solely their own and not intended as medical advice. For any health issues, we strongly recommend seeking guidance from a licensed professional.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Rare Realities with Madimo Mimo Mokgosi, where we dive into the emotional journeys of individuals living with rare conditions, where we tell one story at a time. Imagine going to the doctor and coming back with a diagnosis that it can either be cured, cannot be cured, or you have to live with it for the rest of your life. Today there's a little twist. I have my guest here, Melisa Evans, who is the managing director of Step Ahead Staffing.
Oh, well done.
So, Melisa, now people are wondering, what am I talking about when I say a twist? I want Melisa to introduce herself and what she does.
Well, thank you. Firstly, I'm really honored and thankful to be here. I'm Melisa Evans. I'm the managing director of a recruitment and talent business. We've been going for just over 19 years. I think for me, when I first started out the business, I had the opportunity of being on both ends. Firstly, I was a candidate and I was a client. And I picked up that there's a gap in the market. You know, there was just no personal interface. And when I started up the business, the objective was to be a lot more people-centric and focusing on, on what the candidate needs, including what the client needs. Fast forward 5 years into the business, and our business completely transformed. And we specialize in recruiting people with disabilities. And that's been the bulk of our business and something that I'm truly passionate about.
Yeah. I hope everybody got that. So the main focus is disability recruitment.
Correct.
So Melisa, when I heard about what you do, the first thing that came to my mind was, what's the criteria? Because I'm sure there is a criteria as to what kind of disability do you find recruitment.
So I think firstly, it's important to understand is what is defined as a recruitment, as a disability in South Africa, right?
Okay.
So there's two kinds of disability. Firstly, you get your permanent disabilities, those that either you've been born with or are a permanent condition. And then secondly, you'll get your temporary disabilities. You're injured and you can't perform. But the concept behind or the classification of a person with a disability is when there's a limitation for you to perform specific task within the workplace. So when we speak about limitation, it's the onus on the business to provide what we call reasonable accommodation. So we've had the opportunity of placing people from deaf right down to people in wheelchairs, including blind. But we make it a point to support that journey in terms of finding inclusivity and also finding reasonable accommodation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do both people living with disabilities and employers come to you? That means?
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And I wanted to check with you. Normally, I'd have like questions at the top of my head, but I felt like this conversation is so important. There is really nothing I do not want to miss. I wanted to find the challenges in disability recruitment. What are some of the common challenges you face when it comes to recruiting, the conditions with disabilities? How do you overcome them as well?
So the challenges are constantly changing. I think the one that's common that we find is mental disability. I don't think the workplace environment is ready for people that have mental disabilities. And when you speak mental disabilities, you can speak from anything from schizophrenia right down to depression. You know, a lot of people say, I'm depressed, but they don't understand the severity of a person living with a disability, specifically depression.
Yeah.
So it's educating the client firstly, but it's also educating the candidates to be as comfortable as possible to educate the client from a medical condition, from a support perspective, and also just to be patient, and we find that gap is constantly happening. The other challenges that we're faced with and we still face with to this day is a lot of the clients will ask us not to send somebody who's very physically disabled.
Oh, okay.
And I think in the beginning I took offense to it, but now I'm starting to learn to understand that I don't think it's from a place of offense, it's from a
True.
place of ignorance.
True.
So how we overcome that, I always say to them, what is your definition
Of disability.
of very disabled,
Yeah.
or very physically disabled?
Yeah.
And then they will say like, like 2 crutches, or wheelchair. And then it's my job again to say, what is your fear, or what is your perception of somebody who's using 2 crutches or wheelchair? So it's a constant awareness, education journey, because that's what we're constantly going through, a journey. And it's not just the onus on the employer, the candidates as well. So what we found is a lot of the work that we're doing is very transactional. So typically a client will come to us and say they're looking for 20 graduates with disabilities, right?
Okay.
And we place the graduates. We do have a process in terms of supporting the graduates, but we would leave, and we found that absorption was bad, sustainability was bad, people weren't staying. So we've switched it up a little bit. And what we now do is we identify our graduates or our candidates before we find them work.
Oh, okay.
And then we get a coaching team and a support team to come on board. And this team supports in terms of how do you build your vision, how do you build your values, how do you prepare yourself for the workplace. We've got a qualified psychologist as well who helps us pro bono. So we're trying to look at the sustainability behind recruitment, and we're finding that we have a better success rate. We have happier candidates, and that's what it is, because it's such a small community, and that seems to be, it's taken off quite well. So we're quite excited about that. But the only problem is clients don't want to wait for that process. They want candidates now.
Oh.
And we've walked away from projects because we're like, the candidates are not ready for your business. All we need is another 2 weeks, So it's constant learning. But I think what I'm quite proud about is my team has grown to a point where we can confidently walk away from projects, especially if they're not serving the candidate, because a lot of the candidates come back to us. And we can't, one of our key values is the integrity and the honesty.
Yeah.
And putting the candidate first. So we've reached a point where if our client can't meet any of our requirements from a reasonable accommodation, from a coaching perspective, we're comfortable enough to say that we can't help you, until you are clear that firstly you'll coach, you'll mentor, and there's going to be a sustainability plan in place.
Because I was just about to ask you, this means that you make research from both ends.
Absolutely.
From someone who is disabled to where they're going, because you also need to
align them with it.
And check if the workplace as well has, let's say, wheelchair compliant, and the environment on its own. Oh, okay.
So there's quite a lot of steps that go into it. So an OT team goes in first.
It is quite interesting. I also want to find out, when you started the recruitment, I'm sure you had like a vision, a mission. Was it a personal thing? Because sometimes we do things from a personal point of view. You see, let's say a family member struggling, and then you think, actually, this is where I need to come in and do something about it. Was it something that...
I've only actually started learning how to tell the story behind it recently. So I come from a big family. I'm the youngest of 6 siblings. And from the age of like 5, there's a huge age gap, right? I don't know what my parents were thinking of, but I landed up on this earth. Like a good 10, 12, 13 years. And a lot of my siblings would get ready and go, look for work and get ready. And I would be the one who sits and helps them put together the questions.
Okay.
And iron their clothes. So, when it says God calls you to something,
True.
I truly believe from the age of like 6, I've been recruitment has been my... The disability end, I have a hearing impairment.
Okay.
And I think I've been hiding it for a long time.
Okay.
I also had a very good friend who was involved in a car accident, and she worked for one of the financial services companies. She's quite a senior person, and then unfortunately she damaged her spine. So she was in a wheelchair. And I remember watching her transformation, So the company tried to accommodate as best as possible, but at some point it just wasn't working. And for somebody who was quite senior, who was quite educated, all of a sudden we just couldn't find her a job.
Yeah.
And the triple B scorecard does help. So for us, it was more than just a compliance. It was
Okay.
more from a place of passion. And I think that's what makes it a lot easier and less frustrating and less transactional as well.
Okay. For someone who doesn't know, and myself as well, can you please explain the triple B's?
Triple B scorecard.
Yeah, scorecard. Yeah.
So I might butcher it, so excuse me.
It's okay.
So the triple B scorecard is it's called the broad-based Black economic empowerment
Okay.
that has been put in place, and a lot of organizations have to comply to reach a certain level. So you get anything from a level 1 to a level 7, right?
Okay.
Level 1 being your best procurement point, and a lot of the global companies don't have a level 1, because for you to get to level 1, they look at 7 points. And those 7 points can be ownership, it can be CSI, it can be management within the business, right? So what they found was a lot of your blue chip or global companies weren't driving diversity and inclusion.
Okay.
So the triple B scorecard guides you. It's almost like a framework,
Okay.
because a lot of companies want to work with the company that has the best level, right? Being a level 1. So we are level 1 as a business.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that scorecard is the recruitment of people with diversities, the recruitment of people, your African, Indian, colored. So there's many factors to it. And one of the points is you have to employ people with disabilities. I think that's what I'm trying to get at.
Okay. Yeah.
So a lot of people use it as a tick box exercise. So they almost say, we need somebody with a disability, we need 2 people. Because the minute they get 2 people, they can put it onto their scorecard.
True.
And then they qualify for points, so to say. So it's a lot more complicated than making it. I'm not a subject matter expert. But because of that, a lot of the companies were driving the recruitment of people with disabilities.
Oh, okay. Like I'm just sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, who would have thought that we'll be talking about businesses and recruitment? But it's just so interesting. Can you also share the legal and ethical considerations when it comes to your staffing?
So when you speak about legal in terms of...
Like, are there any legal requirements? You cannot work due to maybe it's listed on the legal as an individual. As an individual site, like a company should be aware of when recruiting individuals with disabilities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I hope I answered correctly. If I'm not, maybe stop me, then I can reframe my...
Okay.
So from a legal perspective, reasonable accommodation is important.
Yes.
So when we recruit people with disabilities, the first thing we ask for is for medical certificate, because it needs to be verified, right?
Yeah.
The other education that we've learned is you can't just get a medical certificate from any medical practitioner,
Okay.
right? It's got to be in line with your disability.
Disability.
Then we generally will get our OT team to come on board, because in the beginning, we kind of like just had a conversation with the candidates, and the candidates say, I don't need any reasonable accommodation. And then they get into work, and like epilepsy, the light is too light. Hearing impaired, background noise.
Yeah.
There's many factors, right? So the next step to that is, what is your reasonable accommodation?
Yeah.
So with the support of the OT therapist and the medical practitioner, we put together a case that obviously describes how a client can reasonably accommodate within reason, right? The other thing is also important to note is we have what we call inherent requirements.
Okay.
So those are non-negotiable requirements. So a typical example is one of our clients could be looking for salespeople, and you're constantly on the road. So unfortunately, somebody with epilepsy may not be the best person for that role, or someone in a wheelchair, depending on how often the person's in and out of the car. So some requirements are based on performing the job.
Okay.
And then obviously the other requirements are more from a South African legal perspective. So there's many factors, and I think it's understanding exactly what is the purpose of the role.
Yeah, because I was just going to ask, because anyone can just go to you and be like, I'm disabled.
Oh, yeah, it's
Yeah.
not that simple. No.
But yeah, okay, so you do have to go through the medical.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And we verify the medical certificate.
Oh, okay.
But then it's a lot easier, I should say, when there's a physical disability, because that's you can
True, you
physically.
can see.
Mm.
Yeah. And also, do you have any successful stories that you want to share with?
Lots.
Ooh, okay, share the one that actually, you know what, you can always say, yeah, this was my special moment.
And I think I'm probably not even the right person to ask, because I find that because I'm not always hands on with the process,
Okay.
I just go through the process. So Precious might be the best person to ask, Rafilwe, Rebecca. But I remember my last success stories when we ran a bulk project for one of the retail stores, and we had to place 25 people with hearing impairments. Um, yeah, that was amazing. I remember going into one of the stores because it was near my home. So obviously without disclosing the client, and I saw my candidate.
Oh,
And remember, they have hearing impairment. So some of them have complete hearing loss. So
yeah.
they qualify as deaf.
Yeah.
And in the store, we had a conversation
Mhm.
in sign language, right?
Oh, okay.
But it was just like, and they were like,
Yeah.
oh, sis Melissa, I'm happy. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. No, that's the best
that
thing.
I think that was and my kids are like, you are at it again. Are you recruiting?
Yeah.
I'm like, no, he's part of our family, because they become part of our family.
I can imagine.
But yeah, there's been lots.
Okay, so how do you see disability recruitment evolving in the next 5 years or 10 years or so?
I think and this is my drive. I want us to move away from an employee mentality for people with disabilities.
Yeah.
I think we need to change our stories, and we need to become entrepreneurs. I want to drive entrepreneurship for people with disabilities.
Mm.
I want people with disabilities to employ other people with disabilities.
Mm.
Um, and if I and it's something that we're focusing on now through one of my other business channels, is there needs to be more entrepreneurship and more education around people with disabilities can run businesses.
Yeah.
So if I can be bold about my 5-year strategy, is to probably um, support 500 entrepreneurs with disabilities, and give them market access and give them opportunities to supply chain. Um, so yeah, that's where I want to go. Like, I'm really
Yeah.
moving away from the employee mentality.
Yeah. I also think changing the mentality of only seeing physical disability as,
True.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we also need to consider the disability that are not physical. And I guess that is why also again, in on this podcast, we're raising
Mm,
rare conditions that you don't just see but hear about,
true.
like your mental more than anything.
Mm.
I suppose people are thinking once you're not mentally, it's not that you're mentally unfit to
True.
work,
Yeah.
but you have a mental disability.
Mm,
So I think that as well we should look into in the next, not even in the next 5 years,
true.
but the earlier the better.
You're right.
I also wanted to find out, once individuals with disabilities are hired, how now can you compare or ensure they are providing an inclusive, supportive where they're going? Because the company can say one thing but not acting on
True.
it.
You're very right. Yeah.
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 So how do you?
So we offer, and I think that goes back to our sustainability plan, right?
Uh huh.
We partner with both the corporate and the candidate for the next 6 months of employment. And what does that mean? It means that we check up on them once a month without fail. We either visit the client or we pick up the phone. And people are very vocal. We find
Okay.
that they're comfortable enough to have conversations.
Uh huh.
We've recently had to jump on board with a client who committed to providing support for a candidate that has epilepsy. But I don't think they understood what that meant.
Okay.
And they weren't delivering on it, right? So our IR specialist jumps on board, because it automatically either starts becoming a performance issue.
Yeah.
So we go in, and with our IR specialist, we're like, you committed to do 1, 2, 3. Should you not, this could become a legal implication. But clients are quite accommodating.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's a lot more intent now. It's not just because we got to employ a person with a disability. So the positive thing is they're quick to say, okay, we'll fix it, you know.
Okay.
But we also get some candidates, specifically the candidates with disabilities, that will abuse the system, you know. Yes, they need to go to a medical practitioner, absolutely, and that time shouldn't be considered as leave or sick leave. It's time.
Yeah.
But it becomes a problem when you're taking more than the time you need. And then clients will phone us and say, listen, we don't know how to address this issue, but she takes time off at least twice a month. And she said she's going for medication. Again, we need to understand it within the constraints of puppy, you know.
Okay.
But we're comfortable enough to go into the business and say, like, what's going on? Sometimes she's tired after the session, you know,
Yeah.
after the treatment, and we're like, okay, but you didn't educate us about that.
Oh.
So what does that mean? So we learn every day, and
Yeah.
sometimes we feel that we've got it, and then something comes up, and we're like, okay, we actually don't have it as best as we can. But I think it's having the conversation and allowing the candidates to be comfortable to disclose. So it's an ongoing process.
Oh, okay. Can you also share for someone like me who
Mm.
is not informed much? Let's say for someone who has epilepsy,
Okay.
uh, what must the employer have to accommodate them? Because I know for someone who is using a wheelchair will
It's
have like
easier.
ramps. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
much
yeah,
easier.
yeah.
But for someone with epilepsy,
So there's different levels of epilepsy, firstly, and I'm not going to go into too much of it because it's also important for me to make sure that I'm using the right terminology.
uh-huh.
But stress can trigger an epileptic attack.
Oh, okay.
So how do you manage that? I think as the candidate, you need to know when you need to have breaks out, right? Also to manage your deliverables. So when we are getting the job spec or the order from the client,
Uh-huh.
some of the questions that we'd ask is, what is the stress tolerance? And at what point? Because some jobs are only at month end or the middle of the month.
Yeah.
So it's to understand that as well. Light or the flickering of light
Oh,
can also
okay.
be a trigger. So we don't work in isolation. We work with the associations.
Okay.
So what does that mean? We'll work with Epilepsy SA. We'll work with Cape Town Society of the Blind. We'll work with National Council of Disabilities. So we make sure we get our NPO partners to collaborate with us. So before we place the candidate in the business, we'll have an awareness.
Oh,
Or
okay.
yeah, no, that's a
Oh,
non-negotiable.
okay.
Yeah. So we'll send that information to the client. Worst case scenario, we'll actually have a team go in and say to them, listen, this is how you prepare for the person. This is how you accommodate the person. So that is part of our recruiting process.
Oh, okay. Do you only focus on disability? Because I just thought of someone now, one of my guests who came through and said that she stopped working because of, so my guest is living with kidney failure
Okay.
and she needs to go for dialysis
Mm.
every 3 times a week.
Mm.
So do you only just focus on physical disability, or people like that also, can they come to you and say, okay, this is my condition, and can you please find something for me,
Temporary.
yes,
Mm.
a job where they'll be able to accommodate her?
So we have 3 streams of recruitment. The one is people with all disabilities. We don't discriminate what disability.
Okay.
The other is special projects, which we try and focus on more Africa projects. And then the third stream is people with no disabilities, right? But going back to your question is, we don't just look at physical disabilities, it's all disabilities. So it can be kidney failure. We have placed candidates with kidney.
Okay.
We can place many different, but also I think what's important to understand is we work according to the specifications of a client. So if a client is looking for somebody
Specifically. Okay. No, it makes sense. Okay, advice for candidates now. What
Sure.
advice would you give to an individual with disability who is looking to enter the workforce or find employment opportunities?
I think firstly call us. Joking.
Yes.
Gosh, there's so many different places you can go to now. And I think it's not specifically just for people with disabilities, it's all of our grads or matriculants is be intentional and have a strategic plan, right? And what does that mean is just because you've sent us a CV, don't sit and wait. 9 out of 10 times we've received 20 other CVs.
Yeah.
So yes, we saw your CV, but it's not
Yeah.
top of mind. So be strategic enough to say every single Monday, I will call Step Ahead staff in. Every single Tuesday, I'll call another agency. You know, every single Wednesday, I will go onto LinkedIn and other social media platforms, and be consistent,
Yeah.
because consistency is what will set you apart, right? And I find that a lot of candidates just send a CV.
Yeah. And then they just sit and
And they
wait for
wait.
you.
And I'm like, and then they'll phone like a month later, I send you my CV. And I'm like, excuse me? The reality is we receive on average 20 to 30 CVs a day for different roles,
it's a lot.
right?
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
And this is not just people with disabilities, it's across all streams.
Yeah.
So if you're one of the 30, you haven't taken time to put a proper cover letter, you haven't taken time to set yourself apart from just the CV work, it does become a little bit, you get lost.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because honestly speaking, I only found out about disability stuff
Okay.
when I got an email from Refilwe. Then I made research that actually,
Interesting. There's quite a
yeah.
few.
In my mind, I thought maybe they go through the process of, let's say, like a person who is able to do
Yeah, it's the same
anything, and they
process.
just yeah.
Hmm.
But I feel like it's much easier and
Yeah.
quicker when they go through you, because
Yes.
already you've got companies that come to you and say, okay, we're looking for da 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 da,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
this is what we need. And once you have like all the CVs and you know who exactly need
put
to be
forward.
placed,
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's quite interesting, and most people didn't know of and
Yeah.
don't know of, and thank you so much for coming through and actually now breaking it down as to how and where. But where do we find you?
We are everywhere. Well, from a social perspective, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook. We've got a huge Facebook following. We're on Instagram. I think we're on Twitter. I don't know.
Okay.
But alternatively, I'm happy to share my details as well.
Yeah.
Should I share them with you?
Yeah, you will share them with me, because I know after this episode, I will have a lot of questions
Sure,
as
no
to
problem.
who
Happy
do
to.
we contact, where do we find them, and whatnot. When it comes to the personal side,
Yeah.
now, personal inspiration, who has inspired you the most in the career and why?
I think my mom. My mom is resilient. She's never had a job in her life, but she's been an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And she's just started up businesses literally overnight. Like 1 minute she was a chicken farmer, the next minute she was renting out rooms.
Yeah.
And I think she's taught me to be resilient no matter what.
Okay. And if you were to change one thing, what would it be?
That's an interesting question. Change personally?
In the recruitment process,
Or in
to
the recruitment
better
process?
support the individual with living with disabilities.
I think take away the stigma and the perception that, or the question around not too disabled.
Yeah.
That question really frustrates me to this day. Because what is your definition of not too disabled?
Yeah.
And having to educate them, to use a better way of saying it.
Yeah.
But also just being comfortable enough to know that our job is to create awareness, right?
Yeah.
And to educate them. Have more jobs. Like, I don't know why we are gatekeeping jobs.
True.
Why
True.
are we gatekeeping
Yeah.
jobs? Just, open up our doors more.
Yeah. Also, I feel like people need to, like you mentioned, the stigma. Disability does not mean that you are not able.
True.
Yeah, that's one thing that most people
Yeah.
think. They see someone who is on crutches or wheelchair and they think, they can't do this. When yet that person can still
Perform.
think, they've got the skills, probably even more than an able person. And what is that? What do you feel like we did not touch base on that you would like to share?
I think probably what support can we offer, specifically our matriculants. I think we shouldn't come in at the end of the process.
Oh, okay.
We should probably start coming in from a grade 10, grade 11, grade 12 process. And I remember before COVID, we were very passionate about working with the schools, right? Unfortunately, we probably still need to pick up on it,
Mm.
but we found that awareness and education was happening way too late for candidates. So almost giving them a little bit of hope,
Yeah.
but also being supportive in terms of you need to start thinking of a career plan from like grade 11, grade 12, because we teach these in the private schools, right? We teach them, and I mean, my son's in grade 12 now, and they're really showing him how to prepare a LinkedIn profile, how to approach different corporates, how to approach universities. And that's not been faltered. And
Mm.
listen, university is not the best or the only stream. There's many other streams.
Yeah.
But the reality is you can only take 1% of everything into certain streams. But what happens to the 80%? So I would really love for us to be more intentional about educating our matriculants, but not in that year of matric.
Yeah.
It has to start in grade 11.
I was just about to say, I think it's a good idea actually to actually go into schools to educate more, especially both disabled
Yeah.
and able kids. And there's something that I wanted to ask you, and it just slipped my mind. But the importance of um not just when we go to schools, that I know that there's a parent out there who's
Mm-hmm.
actually listening, who's actually watching and thinking to myself, I've got a disabled child who might not work because of their disability. What message do you have to that parent?
I think have hope that there's more to our life journey that is all about employment, right?
Yeah.
And look at entrepreneurship channels. And when we speak entrepreneurship, it's not about starting an IT company or a recruitment company.
Yeah.
It can be as simple as baking. It can be as easy as
Yeah.
selling sweets,
Yeah.
but it's instill that into their minds very quickly. Because once you give them that tool or that mindset, they can turn anything into an opportunity.
Yeah.
Um, and encourage them that fail fast and move, because I find that we allow ourselves, and I see it with my own kids, um, the sense of failure is very deep, and the fear of it,
Mm.
and they dwell in it. And I'm like, you need to bounce back. But it's also allowing them to understand that failing is not the end of it.
Yeah.
So apart from the fact that, life is life into it for everybody, they've also now having to physically deal with this disability.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so easy for me to sit here, I must be honest with you, and speak about all of this. But yeah, I can't imagine it being an easy journey. But there is a lot of support. It's
Oh,
just knowing
okay.
where the support is. There
Oh,
is a
okay.
lot of support.
That question just came through. Okay, so let's say I submit my CV,
Mm-hmm.
and for a certain position,
Right.
let's say, are you able to say, unfortunately, you do not meet the requirements of this position, but we can direct you to this one where you actually meet all the requirements?
Mm. So yes, I think our role must be more than just role a job spec person match, right? It
Yeah.
should be counseling, mentoring, coaching, um, and the team is very much engaged in supporting that process.
Okay.
We don't always get it right,
Yeah.
because of time and pressure, but we have webinars, we have workshops. We do them very often where we allow an open day to come through, and we help you prepare your CV. We help coach. And we also ask questions around how often are you going for interviews, and why are you being declined? Take me through the
Yeah.
interview process. Because the reality is we can't place everybody. We also don't have scope to all the opportunities because clients choose who they want to work with.
Yeah.
But the one thing that we can do is have these webinars, have these workshops. So it's something that we do often. I think we do it every 3 months. It's either online, or in the provinces we have face-to-face engagements where we'll book a workshop or something.
Oh, okay.
So that's our way of supporting the process.
Okay. Do you have branches everywhere, or you just based in Johannesburg?
So Prior to COVID, yes, we were in Durban, Cape Town, Johannesburg, and PE. But now, in the world of virtual working, yes, we have branches everywhere.
Okay.
We either will collaborate with a recruitment partner there, or one of our team will actually be based there for the day. So yes, we do, but from a virtual perspective.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Melissa, for coming through
It was
and
an absolute
sharing
pleasure.
sharing the insight. For someone who's sitting there and thinking, this is the end, I will never get to work because of a physical change, physical disability. You do have a medical um what do we call,
Condition.
say,
Yeah, yeah.
condition certificate to actually prove and show that you are not able to work as I don't like using the word normal person, but being disabled and
Non-disabled.
yes, non-disabled. So I will be sharing the details and where to find Melissa. She is, again, like I said, a director of Step Ahead. So we are stepping ahead.
You had to be stepping.
Yeah, we are stepping ahead. So don't be shy. Don't be scared. But yeah, we've got you. And until next time, bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.